We believe health is the foundation that unlocks freedom. The freedom to live fully, to be an asset and not a burden, and to chase what truly matters. Through daily practices and proven frameworks, we are here to help you build deep health, find lasting peace, and live with your heart on fire. Welcome to the chase. Hello and welcome back to the show. As always, I'm here with Mr. Ben Bergeron. We are joined as well by friend of the show, E.C. Sinkowski. How the heck are you two?
Wonderful. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And happy to have EC here.
It's a beautiful spring day here. I don't know what it's like down where you are, EC, but
same.
I'm in my happy place today because the weather is finally turning.
Get rid of the snow and the wind. Yep.
So I'm excited to have you on for a very specific reason, which is you've been working very hard at building a new app, and it is coming out, and we wanted to make sure folks knew about the app. Before we get into the conversation that we're going to have, which is obviously about nutrition, can you just give us the quick Cliff Notes version of what the app is and what folks might need to know or want to know before we get into the conversation itself?
Yeah, hopefully it's a kind of a culmination of all the different kind of products and services I've offered to date, and it really is a combination of education, meal inspiration, and also accountability. And I think what I'm trying to solve with the app is with my programs and challenges, people would always ask, now what at the end? And so it really is about how can this person continue with the plan and keep doing the same things as opposed to looking for 6 new diets or something after. So that's what this is trying to answer.
I've had the pleasure of playing with it. It's great. And I think you guys are going to like it. Obviously, EC, we've had you on the show a number of times. So if folks are familiar with those episodes, you'll have a decent sense of where EC is coming from in the world of nutrition. What I wanted to do inside the app, there are a series of programs that you can go through. The first one being the 800 gram challenge, something we've talked about before, followed up with lazy macros, and then EC, your full program, which you call the 3 pillars method. And again, each one of those programs has education, daily education as you go through each of those programs. And so in each one of those programs, there is a little bit of audio, a little bit of education, something for you to listen to or read. And so what I thought would be fun to do is take some of that audio, 2 bits in particular, one from the 800 gram challenge and one from the lazy macros. We're going to listen to it, and then we're just going to have a conversation about each one of those little parts as we go. So this first one is from day 8 of the 800 gram challenge. It's all about imperfect diet days. So let's listen to that, and then we'll chat about it on the other side.
Day 8, consistently good is better than inconsistently perfect. One of the classic ways people mess up a diet is by having cheat foods. People often slip on a diet, like eating a bag of chips, and that gives them the out to quit the diet. Perhaps it's self-sabotage, but it also reflects reality. Processed foods are around us constantly, and most people do find them tasty. Thankfully, these indulgences are not against the 800 gram challenge rules, so these slip-ups can be less of a reason to stop. But conversely, people will stop the 800 gram challenge because they didn't hit the 800 gram number. Ugh, that's just as bad. Assuming you are human, you have multiple days ahead of you where you will A, not eat 800 grams of fruits and veggies, and or B, overeat some processed foods like pizza, cookies, or brownies. Tell yourself now that you have imperfect diet days in your future because you are human. And with that, also tell yourself you won't use those days as an excuse to stop the program. Nutrition has just as much of a psychological component as a physiological one, and we need to watch the psychological habits as much as the physical changes. The guilt and feelings of failure can be largely lifted when we don't have restrictive rules, but we also need to remove any remorse about the lack of 800 grams. What's so frustrating about the perfection mantra is that you don't need perfection to get results. While the calories in that bag of chips certainly count, and we'll talk about that on day 14, a lot of nutrition is about sticking to the program for more days than you don't. You need consistency. It's not about a diet of only steamed salmon and broccoli in perpetuity. It's about showing up more days than you don't. That's it. Accept the bobbles along the way and let each one reaffirm A, your humanness, and B, your commitment to the program.
Okay, my first question to you, EC, what's the 800 gram challenge?
Yeah, people add 800 grams by weight of the fruits and veggies to their choice to their diet, and then continue to eat whatever else they want. So they'll have their protein foods, they might have some wine, they might have some chocolate, but it's really focusing on adding this healthy amount of fruits and veggies each day.
Can you explain a little bit more, maybe in practical terms, what you mean when you say consistently good versus inconsistently perfect? How do I know I'm good versus whatever is on the other end of that spectrum? Where it's like, I'm using something as an excuse and I'm not actually good anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, people want a hard number on that. And of course, things don't work out quite that way. I would first think about it as, are you hitting more days than you last were? Because some people are going to be starting from a place where there's just not a lot of fruits and veggies in their diet. So if they move to a place that, let's say, now has 2 days a week, that has 400 grams of fruits and vegetables, that's huge, and they are more consistent, right? Ultimately, we want to get to a place where most of the days are looking like that, but realizing that's not going to happen. And I would say this is the number I'm going to put out there. I still don't like putting out hard numbers, but when people are really trying to get after a big goal, getting at least upwards of 80 to 90% of days on is what we're going to need to see. But of course, we still need to celebrate the fact of getting there, because we first have to make steps in the direction of better before we're like, and now I can hit 90% of my days all of the time.
Mm-hmm. To shape up the 800-gram challenge, and particularly maybe it's in specific to this app, is how long, because you say day 8, how long does that go on for?
The educational programs for the first 2 pillars, or the first 2 levels, you could think about them, are 30 days each. The intent, of course, isn't that at the end of 30 days, you're like, well, that was fun. Now I'm going to go back to Pop-Tarts and, vodka. But the intent is, hey, now I have enough education that I can continue this habit on my own. And so it's meant to be done kind of in perpetuity. So theoretically, they're doing this forever, so long as, of course, it resonates with them. The third and final program where they figure out their personalized caloric targets is a little bit more beefy, pun intended, and that would be about 40 days long. So yeah, that's how long they are. But the intent is that this isn't like a 3-month diet program. This is, hey, this is how I'm going to approach diet, in the long term forever.
What's interesting about that is if you do understand or you are aiming for forever, the only way you could get your head around that is by admitting that you can't possibly do it perfectly. And it strikes me that when somebody says, okay, I'm going to be perfect at this diet, they're also saying, and I'm only going to do it for 30 days, because we can't, we're not robots, we're not computers, we're not spreadsheets. And so it's interesting that you have to say yes to both of those ends. You have to say yes to imperfection if you want to say yes to forever.
Totally.
Is which end of that is harder in your experience with people? Is it the perfection versus imperfection, or is it the idea of this isn't a 30-day challenge, this is a forever challenge?
I think people find a lot of relief hearing that they don't have to be perfect. And in fact, as I spend a lot of time with my clients saying that, I mean, out of the gates, it's like, you are going to hit the wall is what I always tell my clients somewhere along the way of this masterclass. And now it will be in the app. Somewhere along the way, you're going to have the day that had no fruits and vegetables. Somewhere along the way, you didn't log whatever. You had the day from hell. You have to expect that as part of the process. And accepting that is really then what allows them to do the forever thing. So I think it's getting over this idea that they're just going to get this new diet plan and ride off into the sunset of just always better and infinitely, on the plan, and realizing that what a really good plan looks like has these bobbles, but it's just, again, more days on than not. But yeah, it's that perfection idea I think really kills a lot of people's progress.
Do people think they have to be perfect to be successful in nutrition? Is that a story that you've got to unwind in people's heads?
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting is, yes, I do think so, especially if they go out to eat and they end up getting the appetizer and then they get the dessert and then they end up getting another drink, and they have this whole heck with it mentality. All of a sudden they just keep eating because it's I ruined the diet, so it doesn't matter anymore, right? So I'll just keep going. There is very much an aspect of that, and they think all of my progress is lost. What's interesting is that caloric overage, even from a metabolic perspective, didn't set them back as much as they thought. The body ends up adjusting in different ways such that, let's say you ate 4,000 calories extra, that all that 4,000 calories doesn't go into your fat cells. The real problem is then the days after that they stay off the plan, that they get spun up. I failed the diet. It didn't work. I just gained all of this weight on Friday night. No, they didn't, but that's what they think. What leads them then into is 2-3 weeks, quote, off the diet. That's where they gain the weight. That's where they set everything back again. It's not that kind of one blow up, but yeah, it's this idea that they can do this much damage in any one day. And thank God the body's so resilient that you can't really do that much damage in any single day. You actually have to string together. It works in our favor, but also makes it a little bit frustrating. You have to string together a lot of days to actually make progress in good or bad direction.
What have you seen for that in terms of stringing days, if we're going to use that term, or you said the 80-90%? What does it look like for, somebody signs up, they do They're all excited. They're going to do phase 1, level 1, the 800 grams. What does the 80 or 90% actually look like in real life? Is that like one full day every 2 weeks, or is that every night? Or actually, maybe backing up even farther. This level 1, it's tracking 800 grams. And I think that our audience is fairly familiar with that. It's pretty straightforward. Fruits and vegetables in weight. But you've also said they fall off the rails, but they can also have whatever food they want. So how is eating the other food falling off the rails? Or is there something that we're tracking along the way that maybe I missed?
Yeah, so I don't put rails on all the other stuff. I think a lot of times, and I've done this historically over the years, when I enter these really restrictive diets, it almost makes you want that stuff more. You know, when you say you can't have any sugar, all of a sudden you're like, why do I want all of this sugar that I wasn't eating yesterday? So that's some of it, is taking away some of the restriction. Hopefully mentally it doesn't become as enticing. And then of course the volume of the fruits and vegetables, typically it doesn't leave as much room for all of the ice cream. But you're right, it doesn't totally address all aspects of the diet, and that's why then there's these additional levels for people to work through. But what I've found is that everybody wants to kind of jump to step 3. I know you've seen this also in fitness, and I know you know it in nutrition too, but you know, you want the muscle up, but what you don't see is all of the ring rows and pull-ups that people did for years and years when they come into the gym who actually have the muscle up, right? So the same idea is here. If you want those caloric targets to be successful, if you want to really develop this high detailed plan, I need some nuts and bolts in place first of like the fruits and veggies and protein and whole foods that we all love. And so what happens is, yeah, there is sort of this balance of like, I'm not addressing everything at this stage because I'm setting some habits that you will need once we get to that more complex plan. But you are right. There are people who gain weight on the 800-gram challenge because they take this check the box idea. Like, I'm going to eat my fruits and veggies, but then I'm still going to have all my 6 beers and a pint of ice cream. And it's like, well, okay, you know, we're just not addressing everything at this stage, more from a habit perspective.
And then what does the other part, the streaks or the days, or what does it look like, or the 80-90%? What does that look like in actuality? Is it a day? Is it a meal? What are we saying?
Yeah, until we look at
I know it's absolutes, and we don't like absolute.
Yeah. I know you know the answer too, but until we look at the whole diet, it's really hard to give numbers because it's like, well, did they eat, you know, a scoop of ice cream, or did they eat a gallon of ice cream and all that stuff? But with the number I feel kind of comfortable people wrapping their mind around is, if you really want to make progress, again, we want to see something about maybe 2 to 3 days off a month you can totally throw. Those might be like the Thanksgiving, the birthday, the anniversary, the New Year's Eve, whatever it is. It's just like, what did you eat? It's like, I don't know. But then, yeah, we want to see those other days on for sure. Now, I will say in the app, there are some different badges that people earn, and there is a consistency badge that comes on and off, and it's a bicep, of course, a bicep emoji. Very proud of this one. But if you've been logging 11 of the last 14 days, you get that badge. And some of that is because we just need people to get back to it. Like, it's less about, did I perfectly hit my 90% of days? And it's like, are you sticking to the plan? Because like I said, but it's just so common, is people will go off the plan and be like, it's ruined. And it's only ruined when you stay off the plan.
Yeah. 11 out of 14, 5 or 6 days a week. That rings true,
exactly.
right? 5 or 6 days a week is like what we talk about in the fitness space as well. What kind of psychopath doesn't have the gallon? What kind of psychopath just has one scoop of ice cream?
Everybody of ice cream.
That was one of the Instagram posts I did. Like, it was like, breaking news: man discovers more than one serving and pint of ice cream. And people were livid.
Let's pause to say thanks to a few sponsors, and we'll be right back to the conversation. This episode is brought to you by Helix Sleep, the company that understands the importance of creating your perfect sleep sanctuary. Go to helixsleep.com/excellence today and get 20% off site-wide during their March Madness sale. Let's talk about something crucial: transforming your bedroom into a true sanctuary for rest. Your bedroom should be the place that pulls you in at night, shielding you from the chaos of the outside world. And at the center of the sanctuary needs to be the perfect mattress. That's exactly why I love Helix. They don't just sell mattresses, they help create that perfect sleep environment through personalized comfort. Using their sleep quiz, Helix matched me with a mattress that makes me feel like it was made specifically for me and my sleep style. Since then, my bedroom has truly become a sanctuary I always wanted, a place where I actually look forward to getting to bed on time and winding down each night. Visit helixsleep.com/excellence and take advantage of their March Madness sale to get 20% off of everything. Again, that's helixsleep.com/excellence. We're brought to you by Mudwater, the coffee alternative that's revolutionizing morning routines with their blend of organic mushrooms and adaptogens. Head to mudwater.com, that's mudwtr.com/excellence. Use the code excellence for up to 43% off your order. You know what I love about Mudwater? It's become one of my go-to afternoon pick-me-ups when I need focus but don't want coffee that keeps me up at night. Instead, I get clean, sustained energy from organic ingredients like lion's manes for focus, cordyceps for natural energy, and chaga for immune support. The best part, no more lying awake at night wondering why the heck I had that late coffee. Mudwater gives me the boost I need without the jitters or sleep issues. Head to mudwater.com/excellence and grab your starter kit today. Right now, you can get an exclusive deal up to 43% off your entire order, plus free shipping and a free rechargeable frother when you use the code excellence. Keep the energy natural and refreshing all year long with Mudwater, MUDWTR, because life's too short for anything less than clean and delicious energy. Okay, now let's get back to the show. Talk to us a little bit about the role and the need for forgiveness within the imperfection that you've already laid out. And how hard is it for folks that you've worked with to forgive themselves of whatever happens on Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever happened last weekend, so that they can get, because to me that seems like one of the barriers to, okay, yesterday was a hot mess, but today we're getting back on it, is to first say, and I'm not a bad person for yesterday, and I'm still capable of doing it today. Like, how much of that, I think you even mentioned this in the little audio we listened to, like there is a psychological component and the physiological component. How much is forgiveness a part of that psychological part?
Yeah, big. I mean, I think they're unique in the fact that they really like chocolate or chips or pick your processed food of choice. Like, they are very much these addictive like foods, and we like the taste of them, and we're designed to like the taste of calorically dense foods from survival. So I have a lot of people, I feel like they feel almost like a confession. They're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I can't stop eating M&Ms. I'm like, well, you're human. That's really the tasty food. That's you're not weird. You don't have some really weird willpower. And yes, the more you eat fruits and veggies, the more that stuff you don't always like. But still, it's like, I like a lot of fruits and veggies, but yeah, I still like Peeps. I still like frosting. Like there's something about these foods that we like. And so I think people, I guess, take it as like a personality flaw. They think that they just have no willpower or strength, when you want to reframe it as, of course you succumb to this stuff. It's quite literally everywhere you walk in our environment. You can't go to a social event without it. It's, again, at all these stores that have nothing to do with food, why is there the option to buy peanut butter cups when I go get a set of sheets at Home Goods or something like that? It's literally everywhere. They overserve the portions. It's cheap. It's tasty. Of course you're eating this stuff. So it's a little bit of just realizing that they're more in the norm than the weird person. I also have people confess, they'll be like, well, I come from a family of eaters. And I'm like, that's everybody. That's literally every holiday. That's every tradition. It's food. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't know. It's not totally answering your question, but I think there is this internal guilt about people who liking this food, when in reality, it's a very natural response to it. In fact, it's more odd for people who are like, I really hate chocolate. You're like, really? Yeah. That's more odd than, liking this stuff.
You went over the Peeps thing so fast.
And it's that time of year. It's that time.
I know it is. And I know I've known you for a long time. And I know that that's your thing.
I know. And
I also like, and the way you kind of rolled that in as well. It's like, no, it's weird if you don't like M&Ms. It's weird if you don't like chips. It's weird if you don't like Peeps. Like, easy. No, that is weird. Peeps are, but the Peeps are a crazy thing.
It's kind of like pineapple on pizza. It's very divisive.
Pineapple.
But
that's a good one.
It does let you know that I have the taste buds of a 6-year-old. So.
Oh my God, Peeps. We're coming up to it.
Right.
I know you're excited.
And the yellow chicks sell it the fastest because they're the best. Okay, moving on.
Is there any taste difference between any of them?
Okay, I know we're derailing the podcast at this point, but I did do a blind taste test with my family, and I was able to pick out the yellow chicks over like the pink chicks or the purple chicks.
Hey,
really?
I'll take that. I'll take it. Do you get the sense that, Ben, when we have these conversations, even EC, when you and I have these conversations, I can imagine people listening to, Chasing Excellence or Consistency Project thinking, well, those two people are perfect. They don't have a bad day. They don't have an imperfect day. All they eat is meat on leaves. And, they never have ice cream. Maybe they know you have Peeps. But how hard is it to get people to understand that imperfection is part of life?
So I've kind of lived on both sides of that coin. And I think that's one side of it is, for me, the way that my personality works is it was so much easier for me to try to be a quote, like, I don't want to use the word perfect this way, but like incredibly disciplined, because it just made it so easy. And the analogy I would give is like, if you were to go to a party and someone would offer you a cigarette, it's not even a temptation because I don't smoke cigarettes. It was the same thing for me for years where I didn't have desserts. I was like, I just don't do desserts. Like, it just made it so much easier for me. Then I found it way, way, way more challenging to decide every single time a dessert was in front of me of like, should I have the dessert today? Should I not? It's like, do the math, like 80%. Okay, EC said it was this. And is today my day? Like that was exhausting. It was just so much simpler to go, I'm just going to push that aside. Like, I'm not going to do that. And what that will allow me to do is maybe like overeat a little bit on the thing. Like, I'll go and have, and because of that, I'll have 3 chicken breasts. So I also think that like this all or nothing perfect thing also goes in terms of the way that we prescribe it. It's like imperfect. I don't know how this is like some Matrix type stuff right now. But like, it's allowing for people to try to be perfect isn't necessarily the wrong way either. If it works for them, because it didn't hurt. It didn't cause me to binge. It wasn't socially weird. It wasn't leading to an eating disorder or anything like that. It actually just massively simplified my life. And the other side of that is like, I did that I didn't have a dessert or a soda or a piece of bread for 12 years. That's weird. Now me on this side, I look at that and I go, that's messed up. That's so weird. But when I was doing it, it was way easier. Now, with kids and stuff, it's like I wouldn't want to do that. So now I do the imperfect version, right? But I also do try to create some guardrails around it. And Patrick knows, but like we do every Sunday during the summer, our family goes for ice cream. It's like, but the kids don't ask for it other times because that's when it is. So I just work really well with guardrails and going like, I don't need to like fight. If the ice cream's in my fridge and we don't know when we have that or not, that's super hard, especially with kids. Like, can we have the ice cream tonight? What? It's like, oh my gosh. So I don't want to demonize perfect as well. And I get perfect's the wrong word there, right? Trying to be 100% compliant. I think that trying to be 100% compliant, and if you don't, and you beat yourself up, that's the negative thing. Or it derails you and you go, as EC said, now the next 3 to 14 days you're off the rest, or you stop the thing altogether, whatever that looks like. It's because you could see it as like the guy at the end of Dodgeball as well. Like, he's ripped and does nothing but chicken breast, and then he's like, oh, screw it. And he turns into like, eating with like leftover chicken between his fat folds. Like,
right. Goes the other way.
Yeah, it goes the other way. So I think it's like, if it is done appropriately, there is room for that.
It kind of goes back to what I was saying, or whatever that clip was about the psychological component. And this is where nutrition is so personal, about knowing yourself. The fact that Ben knows, like, hey, I do better with less of this decision fatigue. It's just easier for me to say no. That's what also makes nutrition successful. It's not following what Ben said just because Ben said it, although it's oftentimes a good idea. But still, it's just sort of like he knows himself well enough that that's going to put him in a better spot. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great point, that you can kind of choose your paradigm. And I've had that people with the master classes, they kind of get through the tracking part and they realize they do better without all the tracking. It's so long as you understand the underlying concepts and how you're controlling them. You know that you don't want to overeat ice cream. So what are the boundaries that you put on it? Some people are going to weigh and measure. Some of people are going to say, I'm going to have it on Sunday. That's where nutrition gets really personalized.
I don't think that there's enough emphasis on the psychological. Eating to me is so is training. Like getting people, like training is a psychological thing. It is like, Conor McGregor has said it. They ask me what percentage of being a champion is mental. It's like 100. It's like every single time you have to go to the gym, you have to decide to go to the gym. You have to decide it's 100%. percent of it. And I think very much about that in terms of everything, like nutrition or training, fitness, or your career, whatever it is. So I love that yours is leans into that so heavily, because it is. It's psychological as much as the physiological. Yes, like this is what processed food does to you versus 800 grams of fruits and vegetables. Okay, cool. But it ultimately comes down to the psychological thing. And also meaning that like the personalized, right? That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I'm not trying to be like, I've got all these great ideas, but my intent along each step is how much flexibility can I give the person? Because that's where that psychological part comes into play. Technically, no, people don't have to do the 800-gram challenge to be healthy, but with my 800-gram challenge, my intent was it doesn't have to be this many vegetables. It doesn't have to be kale. You love potatoes, great. You hate potatoes, great. We can still do this to try to maximize flexibility, because the mental aspect becomes a really big part of this.
Yeah.
Last question on this that I've been thinking about as I've listened to the last few minutes, which is, I think there's a really valuable distinction between discipline and identity. And I think, Ben, in your first answer, what you were saying is my identity was such that I didn't need that stuff, or I didn't want that stuff, right? It's the cigarettes is a great metaphor for it. Like most of us identify as somebody who would say no to a cigarette. You happen to identify as a person who for a long time said no to, a pastry, whatever it might be. And I think one of the challenges is if I'm only going to rely on discipline, and then I therefore need to like grin and bear it, and I've got to that's a muscle I have to develop, versus if we can get ourselves to where my identity is, I'm a person who doesn't say yes to the ice cream, doesn't say yes to the pizza. When I go out, I don't drink excessively, whatever it might be. And I think the two of you, and going back all the way back to my initial question, is I think the two of you, I just simply identify as people who don't need / want that other stuff. And that therefore makes it easier, not easy, but easier to certainly hit that 90% of the time, kind of staying on the straight and narrow.
Well, I think that getting your point, even people close to us, family members, are like, well, you just don't like to eat that stuff. So that's why you don't. It's like, oh my God. The reason I went nothing is because if I crack open a door, I'm dumping deep into the deep end. So that's why it was easier for me. It's almost like alcohol thing, right?
Yeah.
I just went I kind of have a problem with that. So if I have an Oreo, I'm going to have the whole sleeve of Oreos. My saying that I say to myself, and this is weird, it's like, if there's something that's, I know I'm not supposed to eat, I'm like, well, I should just finish that, because otherwise I'm going to have to deal with the mental battle. I'm going to have to deal with this tomorrow. Exactly. So it's better just to finish the tub of ice cream so I don't have to deal with this tomorrow. So my favorite food is I love cookies. Cookies would be my thing. Ben is to cookies as EC is to Peeps.
To Peeps.
Yeah.
But it's not we weren't born with that gene. So it's easy to live that way. I also think that it is easier to make the better decisions the more you understand the physiology. So, the big changing moment for me was when I read Michael Pollan's In Defense of Food. It was the first nutrition book I ever read. I can remember when my mom gave it to me for my birthday when I was 23 years old, starting this career. And I went, oh my God, that's what set me off. That's when I stopped doing the thing. I went 12 years from then without doing it. It's who knew one book would be because you go okay, this goes in my mouth, and what happens down there. There's a school of thought in terms of this with alcohol, reducing drinking. The whole idea is learn about the physiological effects. It's what happened with smoking. No one knew smoking was bad for them, so every 22 to 36-year-old male in the 1940s smoked. Everyone did. Just like now, everyone eats processed foods. They educated people on the things that hurt, and it just helps with the decision-making process if you know the effects.
Yeah, I think the identity thing is huge. We talked about this with Adam Bornstein, the author what is it? You can't screw this up, which is really great. You first have to identify as a healthy eater to become one. That identity is like, I am somebody who can make better choices. It doesn't mean always perfect, but I'm somebody who can make better choices is going to help you make better choices. And I also remember a study, they were looking at restrictive diets. Now, some people might not like that I'm going to use the word restrictive here, but they were looking at restrictive diets and adherence, and people who were vegan, and they were calling that, of course, restrictive, were the most adherent. It's obvious why, as versus just a typical low calorie, because they're often doing it for an ethical belief, something like that, environmental belief, and so they're able to stick to it. They identify as somebody who has those morals or those, beliefs, and so it's easier for them to cut out all of these foods. And so, yeah, I think the identity thing is huge, and it really is the first step. It's not cleaning out your cupboards. It's like, can I see myself as a person who is a healthy eater? That's going to help you just as much as, making sure that your fridge is stocked with whatever, the oranges and the apples.
Let's pause to say thanks to a few sponsors, and we'll be right back to the conversation. We're brought to you by Defender, a family of vehicles reimagined for a new generation of explorers. You can explore the full Defender lineup at LandRoverUSA.com. You know that feeling when you're pushing beyond your comfort zone, reaching for something greater. That's exactly what the Defender was built for. From the nimble 90 to the spacious 130 with 8 seats, I tell you, each Defender brings together modern luxury and robust capability. With practical storage solutions and premium materials throughout, you'll adventure in comfort while maintaining that edge you need to keep pushing forward. You can explore the full Defender lineup by heading to LandRoverUSA.com. That's LandRoverUSA.com. We're brought to you by Lumen, the world's first handheld metabolic coach that measures your metabolism through your breath. Head to lumen.me/excellence to get 20% off your Lumen device today. Your metabolism is at the core of everything your body does, from energy levels to sleep quality to fitness results. With Lumen, you simply take a breath first thing in the morning, and you'll instantly know if you're burning fats or carbs. Based on your measurements, Lumen provides personalized nutrition plans tailored specifically to your body's needs. You can even track your metabolism before and after a workout or meals, getting real-time insights into how your body responds. You can learn more by visiting lumen.me/excellence and use the code excellence for 20% off your purchase of Lumen. That's lumen.me/excellence. Okay, now let's get back to the show. Let's jump into our second clip from inside the app. This one is from the Lazy Macros program. It's from day 25. Remind folks, EC, what is the Lazy Macros? Why does it come after 800 grams?
Yeah, so they continue eating those 800 grams of fruits and veggies, and now they're going to focus on making sure they get enough protein. And the number that I put out there is about 0.7 grams of protein per pound of body weight. If they're more than 20, 25 pounds away from the weight they want to be, then they're going to use their goal weight instead of their current weight. But yeah, so they're just focusing on making sure they get enough fruits and veggies, get enough protein. And again, they're still allowed to have other foods, but they're not worried about counting them. They're not worried about restricting them. It's just focus on fruits, veggies, and enough protein.
Cool. All right, so here's a clip from, again, day 25 inside Lazy Macros.
Day 25. I'm so bored of this. Day 25 of the 800-gram challenge program introduced the concept of trade-offs in nutrition. There is always something that we have to give up to get what we want. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And in our busy modern lives, in addition to the information overload in the media, the resounding desire people want from their nutrition plan is for it to be simple. Here's the good news. It can be. But the trade-off for simple is boring. If you want something simple, you want something that isn't new, because new generally requires effort. New, at the very least, requires learning something new, a new recipe or new nutrition information, if not new habits like meal prep and a different schedule. This doesn't mean you have to eat the same thing every day, but it's simpler to have a basic template to follow, which we discussed on day 5, where you eat a lot of very similar meals. Ideally, you have a few go-tos for each meal with a couple of takeout options in a week that are sound, and you rotate through these potentially with small tweaks like rotating fruits in season or the meat selection on top of salads. That's it, and you live those days on repeat forever, save for a few true celebration days as we discussed on day 15 in the 800-gram challenge program. A common retort to this plan is, I'm so bored. The trade-off to reduce time, effort, decision fatigue, and still get results with nutrition is it's boring. That is the reality. The people who just love meal prep, recipes, and cooking usually have made that a clear priority of time in their life. That's great if they love it, But if that's not you, the trade-off is your meals will not be inspiring, interesting, or exciting. Note, the fun foods that we crave to make our diet more, quote, interesting, such as chips, cookies, and crackers, really aren't that different or novel in their nutrition composition. They are all just combinations of carbs and fat, and often salt, in a calorically dense package. What we are craving is the dopamine release from the food. It's not that we are experiencing some new unexplored taste. You know what peanut butter and chocolate taste like. The other side benefit of living the same days on repeat means you don't have to weigh and measure. You learn on day 3 that weight control really comes down to caloric control. You don't really know how many calories you are eating unless you are weighing and measuring, or being very consistent. When you are consistent with your meals and snacks, what is there to weigh and measure every day? It's not the difference between banana or grapes at breakfast that's throwing your calories off. It's when you want to eat these different, interesting food combinations and try new recipes, it's going to take some time to figure out the nutritional value of each and how to put together the entire day to stay on target. Consistency helps get the results you want without weighing and measuring. If you want nutrition to be simple, accept the fact that it's a lot of the same most days.
Alrighty, see, how hard a sell is it to convince people that their nutrition needs to be boring? Because when
you are entering a boring diet. It's really a top seller, you know. I can't keep it off.
The world's most boring diet. That's a good sell. Yeah, I like that. How hard is that and by meaning as a sell, I don't mean like in a marketing sense, but like when people get into this and they start to recognize, oh, this gets a lot easier if I'm eating the same foods day after day after day. Is that a barrier to people sticking with it? This idea that like, oh, okay, I guess it's just going to be like this most days?
You know, I do want to also make the caveat that boring doesn't mean tasteless or you hate it. So there is also that little rub to put the silver lining there. Like I do have a lot of the same stuff every day, but I actually like it. So it can taste like something. It doesn't have to taste like cardboard. But, you know, what's interesting is I actually find some relief from people. So one of the things that is part of this app, but I've tried to test out in different ways with my programs, is I really encourage people to post their meals. And a lot of times there's a reticence around that. People don't actually want to post their meals because it's not, you know, Instagram worthy. And then I'm going to slap up there like string cheese, a protein bar, and 2 oranges. I'm like, hey, this is my breakfast. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is so great. It can be so easy. And I'm like, yes, that's what it is. It's like these people, I know, for example, people will put, you know, Miranda, for example, at Street Parking, she's done her week, and people think it almost looks too repetitive. But it's like, it makes it so freeing. It kind of goes back to what Ben, you were saying about like less decision fatigue and stuff like that. You want the food to be something that you like and will taste good, but I think some people are actually relieved that they don't need to make the 17 ingredient stew every night. Like, oh, I can just have a burger on top of a salad and I'm good to go. You know, make sure I like the dressing and that's it. So I actually think it's more relief than disappointment.
A barrier. Interesting.
Yeah, I like that. I think you pulling it back as well is right on. Like, decision fatigue is so. Patrick and I on this podcast, we talk a lot about like what is it that we're actually truly chasing, and the thing we're really looking for, in my mind, is freedom. And if you are constantly trying to figure things out, as you said, that's a lot of decision fatigue. That's taking up space in your mind. That's not free to go and do the other things. So I think it's, you know, the repetitive, we'll call it repetitive versus boring. The repetitive part of it is spot on. You said before we listened to that, I just want to circle back a little bit. I have a question for you. Yeah. You said 0.7 grams of protein for every pound of body weight, unless you're maybe 25 pounds away from your, 25 pounds or more away from your goal weight. Would that be up or down? Like if a guy is 165 pounds and they want to be 190, would you encourage them to go to the 0.7 off of the 190 as well?
I generally have defaulted over the years. I don't think it's wrong to necessarily do what you're suggesting, and that is they want to gain mass to eat up, if you will. But I've generally found that we have this issue with consistency. So even for the case of people wanting to gain mass, I still encourage them just to start here. Because sometimes what happens when people want to gain mass is they can do it for 3 days. And on the 4th day, they're so sick of overeating that they undereat. And when you look at their averages, it's basically the weight loss case in reverse. If we start looking consistently, they're actually not eating as much protein because they just can't stomach it. Now, I do think that once we get to a place of consistency and people want to gain mass, I will up it to about 1 gram per pound or closer to where they want to be within reason. But generally for starting, I almost put everybody kind of here to make sure that we're doing it day in and day out before trying to get too aggressive.
Cool. The other one is that you said that we learned about in day 5, I think, which basically like it's weight loss is a function of calories. Mm-hmm. That, as simple as that is, that's a hotly debated topic.
Yes.
If somebody was to eat 1,800 calories of fruits, vegetables, and someone else was to eat 1,800 calories, like legit in a lab, like, right? And someone was to eat 800 grams of Oreo cookies and Heineken, is it they would be the same weight at the end of that study?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they would. So calories do drive weight. I think what people miss is not every goal is going to be related to weight, and also the other effects of how likely you are to sustain that. We can pull things off in a metabolic ward study that are not going to work in real life. And so somebody who's trying to do a diet on the Heineken and Oreos at 1,200 calories, 1,500 calories, pick a low number, are much less likely to be successful from somebody who's actually getting fruits, veggies, and protein that will help them stay full. So it's like, yes, calories drive weight, but there are lots of other factors that come into play once we design a successful diet plan. And, of course, most people who want to lose weight, they don't want to just lose weight for next Friday. They actually want to sustain it and be healthy in the long term, or at least I think most of our clients do. So then it's like, okay, well, are we getting enough vitamin E, and are we getting enough selenium, and are we getting enough magnesium? So yeah, we can lose weight on the beer and cookie diet, but what does that look like in terms of our health, our performance, our sustainability, the realism of this? And that's when this whole thing falls apart. And so if my approach to nutrition was just calories, this would have been the Counting Calories app. But instead, it's the 3 pillars, because I need those high quality nutrients. I need the satiety in place before we get to a place of counting calories. And I've found that if you jump to counting calories or counting macros, you end up, and I know I did it for a while, that if it fits your macros, the weird, wacky combinations of processed foods because it hits your numbers. And you're like, why can't I sustain this? And it's like, oh, because I don't have the foundation of fruits and veggies, right? Or proteins.
You were the person that highlighted first for me this kind of difference between real life and lab. What shows up in a... I think that you really highlighted that really well in terms of like intermittent fasting. Most of the studies there are done not even on humans. That's on mice mostly. And it breaks down. It doesn't stand up when you get into, it's not necessarily as transferable as people want to make it to be.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's this tug, I think, also in research too, because how we can prove stuff and how we can say something like, okay, calories control it. We do the metabolic ward study and we measure everything and we put people in hospitals and we can see exactly what they're eating. Okay, now we have to face the fact that that's not actually how life works.
Right.
They're free living people with their own decisions to make. How is this diet now going to hold up once they exit that environment? And so it's interesting. You need both types of studies. You want to show one to show cause, but then to be a very practical approach, you need to say, okay, what happens when people are left to their own devices with all of this processed food around them or whatever?
You see, in that clip that we listened to, you said something about it's being simpler to have a basic template to follow where you eat a lot of very similar meals. And Ben, this is something you and I have talked about a little bit before in the sense of like many of your meals look very similar. EC, I know that when you and I talk about it, a lot of your meals seem very similar. Mine is the same. So EC, could you walk us through a little bit of like what you mean when you say basic templates and how can somebody either as they're doing the 800 gram challenge and or lazy macros, or even just beginning on this process, what is a useful way to start thinking about what those basic templates could or should look like?
Basic templates. Yeah. I mean, some of it, I'm actually going to start with the latter part of your question first. And that is, I just encourage people to start adding foods they like. And they're going to start figuring out combinations and strategies that work for them. Like, I don't have that much time in the morning with the kids or whatever it is, so I'm doing the protein bar in the fruit bowl. Great. So I don't like to put out too many meal structure things because sometimes it doesn't work with their schedule or their preferences. So you just start by adding fruits and veggies you like, then you start adding protein, and you start to see what combinations you keep coming back to. And then for me, for example, like I pretty much for the last 8 months have had 1 of 2 salads every single day at lunch. It's a bagged pre-kit salad that I end up adding more veggies to and I add chicken to. And that's pretty much it. I like them. I like the taste of it. And yes, I get a little variety by changing it. I have 2 basic meals for breakfast in the morning. It's either going to be the yogurt and the berries or it's going to be the protein bar and 2 fruits, And that's what I mean by kind of templates is you have a kind of a few different options, but they're very similar. They're very similar in terms of nutrition structure. Generally, they end up being about 2 cups of fruits and veggies and probably about 30-ish grams of protein, depending on the target. And then you kind of just work up by, again, picking the foods you like and then realizing where you keep settling versus saying, okay, well, it needs to be this type of protein, or you want to make sure that it's like a smoothie or whatever the other rules might be.
Where does that fall in terms of, because I think I do the same thing.
Yeah.
So where does that fall in terms of, you hear a lot of the research or the experts saying that variety of foods is, get a variety of fruits and vegetables. Eat the rainbow is a saying. So where does that, how do you kind of solve for that dichotomy or that contrast?
I think that's great. And I think the diversity is good. But I think people underestimate how powerful whole foods are, even when you don't have the most perfectly diverse set of them. So if you have some diversity, and Patrick knows this one too, so long as you don't do the 800-gram challenge as only watermelon forever, some summer days fine enough, but so long as every single day that you go for fruits and vegetables, you don't only choose watermelon, maybe you get a handful of different fruits and veggies, you actually probably have a wider coverage across the vitamins and minerals and fiber types than people think. I think people think like, oh gosh, potatoes are so bad and broccoli gets boring after a while or whatever it is. If you have 5-6 different things that are on rotation, you're doing pretty good, especially once you start to mix in your protein options and once you get your other foods. So I just kind of advocate to people, don't do anything wacky with their diet. Don't try to really only eat mango and only eat pea protein, and you're actually going to do pretty good. I will say, if we were going to theoretically optimize our diet, this would be the case where I would encourage somebody to really up their diversity. Maybe they really try to go out of their way to get the different, squash, and they try all these new recipes and stuff like that. Do we have evidence that's going to pay off in more years and more quality of life? No. But that would be where I would say, okay, we can theoretically optimize the diet because now you're getting exposed to all these different phytochemicals that exist in our plant foods, all of the different like lutein in spinach and the resveratrol in grapes, and we can expose ourselves to thousands and thousands of these phytochemicals. We're not really sure what they're doing, but we think they're healthy. And so that would be where I would go for people if they're thinking about how would I really optimize this, is okay, let's try to increase the diversity. But for a lot of people, just a handful, several type mixture, you're probably doing pretty good.
Might be a silly question, but is it a worthwhile distinction to make between, and I'm admittedly thinking about myself as a 22-year-old, the distinction between food and a meal? When I was 22, I just wanted food. Some number of years later, I understood that a meal is actually different than food. And when I think about these basic templates, is it useful to think like, this is what a meal is versus I eat lunch when I get hungry?
I love meals. I think meals would simplify people's dieting. I think, Ben, you had that challenge, right? Where it was like the sit down.
Yeah, it was one of our things that you had to, it was like a mindful eating type thing. So no screens, and you had to be sitting at a table when you ate.
But it was also with the trays, so you had the quantity kind of associated with the meal.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's really great because I think what happens, especially in our modern busy lives, is people just like, oh, we'll just grab something to snack on. And they don't realize that now they've had 20 snacks that were never really filling, and they have no clue that they actually hit 3,000 calories today. Because it's like, oh, I just munched on this and I munched on this. And they never really had this time of, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to get full, and I'm going to actually feel like I had a meal. So I think people would be much better off if they approached it like a meal and actually ate till fullness and had it in distinct sessions as opposed to the kind of the snacking across the day. Now, in terms of the physiology, if you get your nutrients and you get your calories, it is up to you. And so this is where, again, there is some personalization that if people are pulling it off and have the results they want at 6 different snacks a day, hey, more power to you. It's when people aren't doing a lot of meals and they don't have the results they want, that would be when I say, hey, let's think about more of a meal mindful approach, as Ben kind of mentioned.
I can say that having done lazy macros for a while now has been particularly helpful for me to understand this is what it needs to look like 3 or 4 times a day. Because I am measuring, because I am tracking on, again, just the protein targets and the fruits and veg. Whereas before I did that, I was winging it. And winging it, when you measure what you've been winging, which I don't think is proper English, you realize how bad you are at winging it. And so how do you balance the need to weigh and measure and track, which is what this app really is, it's doing, versus what we've already talked about a little bit today, what you and I talk about a lot, which is this avoidance of restriction. How does somebody balance those two things such that, okay, I'm going to start to weigh and measure, but I don't end up moving into this really restrictive diet?
Well, I do use the progression in the app. So that's the way that I really encourage people to do it, in that they look at the weights of their fruits and veggies first, and then they start looking at their protein grams and major source items. And only when they get to the third level, it's like when we're looking at the calories in your tablespoon of olive oil. So they kind of have to graduate there and start setting the habits in place to be able to do that. But then I also allow people to then work their way back down. To be perfectly honest, I think most of the listeners already know this, that like I don't actually weigh and measure my diet, because once you have that full understanding about your choices and the foods you like and the combinations you need, you don't have to weigh and measure. You have that knowledge to then apply, and you wing it. But you can only get to that stage of winging it by first going through the proper education level to get there. So I kind of see it as you work yourself up through the progression, and then you have the flexibility and freedom to apply that knowledge however you want, and you don't have to track forever to have those results forever.
Give us again, just so people can hear it again, but the progression, the 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. So the 3 pillars method is really looking at quality in the diet, protein, and calories. And so the way that I do this in the app is the pillar 1 is the 800-gram challenge. We're using fruits and veggies as the proxy for quality. Then we go to lazy macros. So that's now they keep eating the fruits and veggies, and now they also look at a protein target. And then once we get to the final 3 pillars method, we add on to that by tracking all of the calories and all of those foods that we're eating, and including all those foods like the pizza and the wine and the dark chocolate. So again, it's 800-gram challenge, lazy macros, then into the 3 pillars method, looking at quality, protein, calories.
We're going to put links to the app in various places, show notes, listener guide. You do have something coming out in April. You want to let people know about something in April. So let's do that, and then we'll wrap up and get out of here.
Awesome. Yeah, kind of doing a spring bundle. So people can purchase all 3 levels of the app, as well as a year of logging for $397. But then in addition to that, they'll get access to a chat group where I'll be answering questions daily and live streaming weekly. So it's a way that you can get my support going through the app and the programs. And yeah, I mean, the app will always have kind of a rolling admission, but this is a great way to get my help as you need it if you sign up by April 1st. We'll put the Spring 25 coupon code and the links in the show notes, or whatever you do, Patrick, on your end.
Yep. I'll make sure that's all in there. Thank you, EC. Thank you so much. Congrats on getting this app out into the world.
Yeah, thank you guys.
EC.
Good to see you.
Thank you very much for tuning into the show. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening or watching so you do not miss another episode. For more frameworks and daily practices, visit chasingexcellence.email. And don't forget to tap the link in the show notes for today's full listener guide, where we break down the key ideas and provide actionable steps to help you put them into practice. Until next time, keep building health, finding freedom, and living with your heart on fire.